Before we get into the substance of this episode, make sure you subscribe to Atten Recounts and share this video with anyone who takes history and survival seriously. For modern people, tornado prediction is, well, inseparable from Doppler radar, satellite imagery, and numerical weather models. We assume that without those tools, accurate forecasting is impossible. Yet for many Native American nations living in what we now call Tornado Alley, violent rotating storms were not mysterious surprises. They were anticipated events. In many cases, communities could sense the approach of tornadic conditions a full day in advance, sometimes even longer, using nothing but observation, memory, and cultural transmission refined over centuries. This was not folklore in the casual sense. It was applied environmental science, learned through hard experience, tested repeatedly and passed down because lives depended on it. For tribes such as the Pawnee, Kiowa, Comanche, Osage and Lakota, weather was not something that happened to the land. It was part of a living system that included animals, plants, soil, wind, and people. This worldview mattered because it encouraged continuous observation rather than just occasional measurement. Hunters, scouts, and elders were constantly noting subtle changes, not because they were predicting storms for curiosity's sake, but because, well, weather determined migration timing, hunting success, shelter placement, and, honestly, survival itself. Tornadoes, which could obliterate a village in just a few minutes, were therefore treated as patterns to be understood, not simply random acts of chaos. One of the earliest signs consistently noted was, abnormal wind behavior long before any clouds looked threatening at all. Elders described winds that felt, as they put it, confused or arguing with themselves, blowing in short, irregular bursts from shifting directions. Instead of a steady, prevailing wind, there would be alternating warm gusts from the south and cooler, unsettled air from the north or east. Modern meteorology recognizes this as low-level wind shear, a critical ingredient for tornado formation. Native observers did not use that term, but they understood the implication. When winds lost their usual rhythm and direction, dangerous storms were being assembled somewhere beyond the horizon. Animals were considered more reliable than human senses because they reacted earlier and without interpretation. Plains tribes observed that bison would bunch tightly and begin moving away from open lowlands, even when grazing conditions were good. Birds would abruptly abandon thermals and fly low and fast toward tree cover. Insects, particularly grasshoppers and ants, would disappear into the soil en masse. These behaviors often occurred a full day before severe weather. Today we know that animals detect rapid pressure drops, low-frequency sound waves, and subtle electromagnetic changes that precede tornadic storms. Native communities did not need to explain the mechanism to trust the signal. When multiple species changed behavior simultaneously, well, preparations began. Contrary to popular myths, native observers were not waiting to see funnel clouds. They focused on texture and colour long before storm cells organized. A greenish or yellow-grey tint in the sky, especially near sunset, was taken seriously. So were high, thin clouds moving quickly in one direction, while lower clouds drifted another way. These stacked movements signaled instability through the entire atmosphere. Modern storm chasers recognize these as classic precursors to supercell development. The difference is that Indigenous observers tracked these signs habitually, not as specialists, and acted on them without hesitation. Sound was another overlooked indicator. Elders spoke of a distant continuous rumbling that was not thunder and not wind. It was described as a low, breath-like noise travelling across the land. This aligns with what we now understand as infrasound produced by developing tornado-capable storms, which can travel hundreds of miles ahead of the system itself. People who lived outdoors most of their lives without constant background noise were far more attuned to these signals than modern populations. When multiple warning signs aligned, villages did not panic. Instead, they acted methodically. Teepees and lodges were reinforced or, temporarily lowered to reduce wind resistance. Camps near rivers or low ground were relocated to higher wooded areas that broke wind flow. Hunters delayed travel, and scouts were sent to elevated ground to, monitor cloud movement continuously. This was not guesswork. It was risk management based on probability learned through honestly generational experience. This knowledge is not obsolete. If you live in a tornado-prone region, you can begin by paying closer attention to wind consistency throughout the day, rather than relying solely on forecasts. Notice whether animals in your area change behavior collectively rather than individually. Learn the typical sky colors and cloud movements for your region so anomalies stand out. Reduce noise pollution in your environment when possible, especially outdoors, so distant sound changes become noticeable. These steps do not replace technology, but, they can provide earlier situational awareness, especially when power or data access fails. The ability of Native Americans to anticipate tornadoes without instruments really challenges the assumption that scientific understanding requires modern technology. What it actually requires is, sustained observation, honest record-keeping through oral tradition, and a willingness to treat nature as something that communicates through patterns. When those conditions exist, prediction becomes possible, even in one of the most complex weather systems on Earth. If you found this breakdown valuable, do subscribe to Atten Recounts, share this episode with fellow history buffs and survivalists, and help keep serious research-driven storytelling alive on this platform.